This week at the movies, remember the 80s? Some of us have been trying to forget them for a long time.
But that's where we're headed as we take a trip in the hot tub time machine.
I hate this decade. How am I supposed to get a job?
Also coming up this week.
She's in my house all night and nobody tells me?
Who's the predator and who's the prey? Amanda Seyfried and Julianne Moore in the sex thriller Chloe.
Andy Garcia and Juliana Margulies try some comedy in a Bronx tale called City Island. We'll tell you if it's a marriage worth your money.
Let's get started.
Plus, we'll take a look at How to Train Your Dragon, and also some movies that may be flying under your radar.
You don't think it's a little weird, a bunch of guys just piling up in a big bathtub together?
It's called male bonding, okay? Haven't you even seen Wild Hogs?
John Cusack, Craig Robinson, and Rob Corddry get all wet and go back to the 80s in Hot Tub Time Machine. I'm Michael Phillips of the Chicago Tribune.
And I'm A.O. Scott of the New York Times.
Here on At the Movies, we strive to maintain a rigorous sense of decorum as we impart to you, the high-minded cinephile, our discerning judgment when it comes to, oh, hell, let's just talk about Hot Tub Time Machine. Going into this one, I wondered if we were in for this year's Snakes on a Plane, a title in search of a reason for being beyond the title. But director Steve Pink has come up with an exuberantly crass and surprisingly clever comedy about three middle-aged guys who return to the ski resort they visited back in their 20s. There, they stumble into a portal to another time.
Dude is rocking cassette player.
Just relax. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation.
Leg warmers, Jerry curl. It must be some kind of hot tub time machine.
That's Craig Robinson, one of the best deadpans in the business, addressing the camera there. Rob Corddry gets the lion's share of the raunch as the self-destructive runaway train of the bunch, while John Cusack, who also produced this picture, straight-mans it as Adam. He's full of romantic regrets. He hopes to make right on his second time through the year 1986. Another great deadpan, Clark Duke, plays Adam's nephew.
Why are we in our young bodies and you in your regular body?
I don't know. Yeah. Shouldn't you be invisible? I know. Because you guys exist here and I don't.
Hey, why are you flickering?
I need you to touch my arm or something to see if I'm still real, okay? Just see if you can, like, put your hand through me.
What you're in for here, essentially, is a chlorinated riff on Back to the Future, very hard R-rated. Now, that movie's most blatantly recalled in the bit where Duke's character meets his skeezy mother-to-be.
Let's get this party started. Who is carrying me home tonight? Hey, bro. Nicholas.
Hey, girl.
Who's the geek?
He's your son.
The foul-mouthed verbal wit may not be highbrow, but it's actually there, along with the gross-out psych gags. And just for the running joke involving Crispin Glover as a one-armed hotel bellman, this is worth seeing, preferably while wearing spandex. Tony, I'm a little ashamed to say it, but I say see it. It's funny.
I'd love to see you in spandex. But that aside, this movie is vile, crass, crude, obnoxious, sloppy, and I say by all means see it. I loved it. I mean, part of it was just being, you know, someone who was 20, as these guys were in 1986. I loved seeing all the references to the Karate Kid and Back to the Future and Red Dawn and all the songs, Motley Crue, Spandau Ballet, an amazing version of Jesse's Girl. But I think this is also a very smart movie, smarter than a movie like...
Than it looks.
And smarter than a movie like The Hangover, because it's about, like, you know, middle-aged guys who are stuck, longing for their youth, and they go back and discover that they were really just as miserable at 20 as they are at 40.
Well, the movie's got real nerve that way, I think, because it doesn't bend over backwards to make you like or empathize too much with anything that's going on. Here's the thing, though. I think, honestly, you can break it down to just how is this thing paced? You know, when I was watching The Hangover, I just felt like, you know, okay, let's go. Where are the verbal jokes? I don't even care if they're bad. I just want more of them. Well, here, it's like a buckshot approach, but the pacing is correct, and I just feel like it's got the right kind of exuberant, crass spirit.
Yes,
you know?
and it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it's also not, you know, mean-spirited and aggressive. I think, you know, it's odd to say about a movie that has the kinds of jokes that this movie has, but it strikes just the right tone.
Well, yeah, maybe so, yeah. But we'll see. I think we're going to hear about this recommendation. We're going to hear some heat on it, I think.
Well, we'll just climb in the hot tub and go back to 1986 where people understand us.
There you go.
Next up is a busy little comedy called City Island, named after the quiet seaside community in the Bronx where it takes place. Well, maybe it's not so quiet, at least at the Rizzo family dinner table. Everyone in this family has a secret, but that doesn't mean they whisper.
Why don't we have a big home-cooked dinner tonight? You know, something special. You want balloons or something?
No, I don't want balloons or something. I'm just saying something nice.
When don't I make it nice?
Make something nicer.
Make it yourself.
Andy Garcia is Vince Rizzo, the patriarch, a corrections officer with two secrets. One is a long-lost ex-convict son named Tony, who he brings home with him one day. The other is the acting class Vince takes when his wife, Juliana Margulies, thinks he's playing poker. A lot is going on here. Vince's other son has an unusual sexual fetish. His daughter has dropped out of school to work as a stripper, and everybody in the family sneaks off to smoke cigarettes.
My husband thinks I quit.
One good thing about the joint, they don't let you smoke anymore, so I quit inside.
Being in prison and not being able to smoke? That's like being in jail.
The writer-director, Raymond DeFelita, made a similarly warm-hearted New York neighborhood movie a few years back. It was called Two Family House. Be sure to check that one out. City Island is not as good. There's too much plot, too much shouting, and some very uneven performances. But I liked a lot of the cast, and I was won over by this movie's affectionate, silly spirit, just enough to say you should rent it.
You're just conflict averse. You just don't like the shouting. No, I have to say, skip it. I like this cast a lot, and it is a true pleasure to see Juliana Margulies in particular take on a kind of role that she's clearly capable of, that kind of juicy comedy that she doesn't get to play on The Good Wife on television.
Yes, where she's always so severe.
And she's good in that mode too. But and it's fun to see Andy Garcia kind of cut loose and play a much more kind of genial, relaxed guy. But everything you say about the script is what undermines this picture, I think, from front to back, man. I just feel like it is a season's worth of comic complications, half of which you might believe, jammed into about 100 minutes.
Well, sure, but I think that this is one that, for me, kind of illustrates the difference between the see it and the rent it recommendation. Because I think if you did go to a theater and saw this on the big screen, the flaws would be magnified, and the sort of the coincidences and the revelations would kind of seem glaring. But if you watch it at home, you know, and you just are in the mood for some sort of mild, warm, fun entertainment with some nice acting, some great, you know, New York City locations, and a kind of warmth and
it's an endorsement of the cast. But if this cast, you know, can't make it work, and the cast includes Emily Mortimer, Alan Arkin, very good people. Sorry, it's a skip it.
Okay.
Coming up next, Liam Neeson and Julianne Moore play a couple threatened by an alluring stranger, Amanda Seyfried, in the psychological thriller Chloe.
And later, from the 3D kids movie How to Train Your Dragon to the adaptation of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, we'll do a speed round of movies now in theaters.
This business transaction, which is what this was, is over.
Our next movie, Chloe, is the kind of psychosexual drama the French tend to do better than most, so it's no surprise that it's a remake of a 2003 French film which was called Natalie. Julianne Moore is a Toronto gynecologist who suspects her husband, played by Liam Neeson, of cheating on her, so she hires a call girl to determine his seducibility. Well, it's more interesting than marriage counseling and probably no more expensive.
I want to find out. See what he does if you present yourself to him.
Most of my clients are married.
He's not the client.
That's Amanda Seyfried as Chloe, whom the doctor pays to provide regular and salacious updates on her husband's activity.
I know there's a place in the back where they keep tools and stuff. No one ever goes to that section. It's like a secret hiding place. He brought his mouth up to my lips. We hovered there for a long time.
From there, the sexual triangulation shifts in Chloe, and the director, Adam Agoyan, working from a script by Aaron Cressida Wilson, focuses on what Chloe really wants, as well as what Moore's character might really want from her. Chloe takes a series of abrupt turns in its second half, heading straight into Fatal Attraction territory, though it doesn't end the same way. Agoyan, whose earlier work includes a superb drama called The Sweet Hereafter, directs with as straight a face as possible, and that's how these three very good actors play it as well. I say rent it more for the fancy wrapping than the present itself. I think the first hour does make it worth a look as a rental.
And I say subscribe to Playboy for the articles. I mean, you know, you can call it fromage, but it's still cheese in the end. And I would much rather go back and see Hot Tub Time Machine again, because there's something about the kind of highbrow, beautifully art-directed, sort of lavish, quiet. I mean, Agoyan is a very skilled filmmaker, but I just think that this movie is kind of trashy and won't admit how trashy it is, especially when you get to these plot twists in the second half, which completely, for me, voided all of the psychological implication and interest that had been kind of creeping around the edges of the first
absolutely.
half. I think it falls apart.
I will say it finds itself, though, right at the very end. We cannot talk about the ending very much, but because it doesn't quite get into the Fatal Attraction territory, it sort of saves itself, I think, just by a hair. I think Egoyan is a very good director with actors. He's also working in this film in a style completely new to him, this sort of classic, you know, beautifully lit sort of studio lighting sort of thing. And it gives it kind of a swank that, frankly, I enjoyed because the actors don't camp it. You know, that's why it works.
But I think that it's exactly that sort of, you know, grim face, that this idea that, you know, you're watching something serious and important. And in fact, an element of camp is what this story needs, because it's a preposterous potboiler.
Well, no, I think
and he should admit that it is.
I will admit that the French version was in fact better, but this is worth a rent, I say. Worth a rent.
I say it's worth a skip.
Okay.
Coming up, we review everything from a Viking tale to an Irish ghost story. Our speed round of new movies is next.
Next week, Avatar's Sam Worthington wages war in Clash of the Titans.
We fight, we die for each other.
And Miley Cyrus tackles a Nicholas Sparks bestseller in The Last Song.
Next week at the movies.
Pick up!
That was a scene from How to Train Your Dragon. We had an early review on last week's show. It opens this weekend, and Michael, perhaps to our surprise, we both kind of like this one.
Look, best DreamWorks animation feature since Kung Fu Panda 2 years ago. A year ago, we were sitting through Monsters vs. Aliens, a big hit, which I hated. I think this film has great sweep and a spirit, and it's one of these pictures coming out now in this 3D wave that really does demand to be seen in 3D.
Especially these flying creatures, this main dragon called Toothless was just spectacular.
Yes, does the film exist to support these flying sequences? Absolutely. Are they almost as good as the ones in Avatar? Almost.
Yes, they are.
It's pretty good. There's also some interesting films out in limited release this weekend. We'll start with The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Rankuppgifter, tillgång till allt det här.
Det har inte du med att göra. Du beställer, jag levererar.
Tony, this is based on a huge international bestseller. This is a Swedish thriller with a wonderful performance in the middle by an actress not known to most Americans by the name of Noomi Rapace, as this sort of, you know, punk bisexual goth who gets mixed up in this series of unsolved murders. I'd love it. I'd love to recommend it for her, but the film, frankly, seems so kind of old hat to me in the serial killer tropes that I just can't recommend
it. And also,
it.
the violence in this movie is so intense and upsetting, and I don't think actually serves the purposes of the storytelling or the points this movie wants to make.
Right.
There's going to be a Hollywood remake.
Yes, of course.
I don't usually say this. I would say wait for that one and skip this one.
Maybe so.
Also in limited release is Mother from South Korea. This is from the Korean director Bong Joon-ho, who made a movie called The Host. It's a really interesting, strange, kind of melodramatic thriller about a woman whose son has been accused of a murder, and she's trying to clear his name. I thought this was a really strange and fascinating movie, so I'm going to say see it.
Oh, yeah, I say see it as well. I mean, most films, wherever they're coming from, you just end up kind of predicting where they're going. Bong Joon-ho is one of the most interesting filmmakers working, not just in Asia, but really anywhere. Yeah. And I just think, you know, you cannot trust this film from the image you're seeing right behind you right now, because it's not a sensitive character study. It is a crazy mixture of genres and very stimulating. Very good.
Yeah.
And we'll finish with a movie in limited release and available on demand. It's called The Eclipse.
You really believe in ghosts, don't you?
Have you seen one?
I don't know.
Tony, this stars Kieran Hines, a character actor who I've loved in everything. It's wonderful to see this guy in a big part, and it's a great little ghost story, I think, about a man who's lost his wife and who's being haunted by some apparition or another. He meets a writer at a writer's conference who's also got her own ghost issues, and it's this kind of interesting love story that comes out of that. Very good.
And an interesting blend of very nicely observed character-based drama with some horror movie effects. So every once in a while, you know, a ghost will jump out of a closet and sort of give you a scare.
Yeah.
And it's handled very well.
I thought at the beginning there's a couple of ghostly apparitions that are really stunning because they're so subtle. A couple of the scares in the middle I thought were much more Hollywood than that. But I think just for Kieran Hines alone, it's really worth seeing.
Yeah, it's a very nice movie. And coming up next, vampires and werewolves face off in our DVD Out Now segment. Now it's time for our DVD Out Now segment. We'll start things off with the Twilight Saga, New Moon.
What are you staring at?
You're sort of beautiful.
Tony, I continue to defend the indefensible. This film was reviled by many, but I enjoyed Twilight New Moon. I enjoyed the first Twilight. Are they great films? No. Are they preposterous? Yes. Are they well done and well acted? In fact, I think so.
I agree, and I think you know, we surprised a lot of people maybe last October when both of us, you know, came down with endorsements, with see it recommendations for this movie. But I stand by mine also. I mean, I think that the mood of you know, unrequited, unfulfilled longing and teenage angst, and the sort of, you know, the increasing complication of this world of monsters, and is Bella gonna go with Jacob or with Edward? It all works on this level of kind of romantic melodrama. You know, it does what it sets out to do.
I don't begrudge people for not liking it, because it's preposterous, and if you don't get into the mood and the vibe of it, you will never get into the mood.
But if you surrender to the 13-year-old girl inside you, it will win you over.
Also out this week, a movie we disagreed on: Tobey Maguire, Natalie Portman, and Jake Gyllenhaal in Brothers.
This is a war story, very intense drama. Tobey Maguire plays a Marine who goes off to Afghanistan. He's thought to be killed there. Jake Gyllenhaal is his no-account ex-convict brother. Natalie Portman is Maguire's wife. I was rented on this, and I guess now is the time that you can rent it. And I think that, you know, the melodrama was a little thin and manipulative for me, but what makes it worth renting finally is the performances of these three very fine
very
actors.
good. And I thought it was worth seeing in theaters. I think you need to give it another look, because I think Jim Sheridan and these actors are working, you know, in the melodramatic form, no question. It's very heated and kind of stylized up to the point where it almost breaks apart. I think it's really strong.
Okay, we also had a disagreement about Wes Anderson's fantastic Mr. Fox.
Tony, this is Wes Anderson's animated adaptation of the Roald Dahl story. I was a skip it on it in the theaters, and I know, I concede it might be time for me to take another look in the home viewing experience.
Absolutely.
And see if I respond to the whimsy, which I did not respond to any better at home. Maybe, I don't know.
The visual craft is extraordinary. The stop-motion animation, these furry little creatures, not only them, but the detail of the sets and the settings and the forest and the houses and the costumes.
Yes.
It's extraordinary. I think that puppets may be his, you know, the right thing
I think
for him
it's
to be working with.
meticulous, as you say, but I just thought it was a little dried out, and I don't know. I'll give it one more look.
I really like it.
And finally, Sandra Bullock in the film that just won her an Oscar. It's The Blind Side.
The sectional in the family room slides apart when you sleep on it. At least that's what Sean says.
So he sleeps on the couch?
Only when he's bad.
This is a movie that we both were skip it votes on, and of course a lot of people did not skip it, and a lot of people were pretty mad at us for saying they should skip it. I mean, what, you know, looking back on that vote, what are your thoughts about this movie?
You know, it's worth a look always to see. I think what performances win Oscars. I think Bullock is very strong in it. I think the film, the storyline is so unfairly weighted in that character's direction. It plays the other character, the key character, falsely. You know, that's not an acting issue. That's a screenwriting issue. So
also, I think it's also an example of a true story that feels, as you're watching it, almost completely phony, and that's a problem for me.
But I love the controversy. I love that we got heat for it, and I love that the conversation and the debate and the argument really kept going.
Argument is always good. Opposition is true friendship. All of the movies we've talked about are available right now on DVD and Blu-ray, and we have more to say about some of our controversial votes and the reasons behind them in a web exclusive on our website. Go to atthemoviestv.com and join the argument.
And coming up next, travel back in time for my 3 to see.
Yeah, we back in time.
I'm so scared. Closed captioning for At the Movies is sponsored by Hotel provided by Park Hyatt Chicago, Chicago's award-winning hotel and luxury dining experience, located in the heart of Chicago's Magnificent Mile on Water Tower Square.
For my 3 to see, it's all about trips back in time. Number 3, Hot Tub Time Machine, which is a raunchy, lowbrow comedy in the vein of The Hangover. I wish The Hangover had this many good, cheap laughs. Number 2, How to Train Your Dragon. It's told with real sweep and features some stunning flying sequences, best experienced in 3D. And number 1, Greenberg, the extraordinary new comedy from writer-director Noah Baumbach, starring Ben Stiller and Greta Gerwig. Baumbach captures modern-day L.A. dreamers beautifully, recalling some of the sharpest American character studies of the 70s.
That's it for now. We'll leave you with a recap of this week's show. And now you can join in the discussion by following us on Facebook and Twitter. Just go to atthemoviestv.com to find out how.
Join us next week for reviews of Sam Worthington and Liam Neeson in Clash of the Titans, and Miley Cyrus and Greg Kinnear in The Last Song. And until then, we'll be at the movies.